Hello, and welcome to Temple of the False Pod, where our decks are not optimized, but our plays, sure as heck, are fun. I'm Andy.
I'm Bruce.
And this week on this episode, we've got some cool things that, you play Magic with cards on generally a table. And something that we all think about from time to time is there's more to Magic than that, right? Because, there is. I'm telling you. If you didn't know,
friendship.
Oh yes, sorry, the gathering. Right, but no, also the accessories. You've got. Well, that's what this episode's about.
The stuff.
Magic stuff. Probably the thing I spend the most money on.
Is the stuff.
It's the stuff.
Well, there's a good chance that a lot of us spend a lot of money on the stuff.
Yeah. I've been thinking a lot about the stuff.
Yeah.
Since I don't know if you watched Ristic Studies. I don't know if it wasn't his latest video, but it was the one before that. It was about like that Gonti deck it was a sleeveless Gonti. Oh,
yeah.
Amazing. If you haven't checked it out, go check it out. It's kind of about the wear and tear that your stuff generally. In this case, it was the cards. Go through in their normal lifespan, and how like that kind of the wear brings character to it, and it kind of comes down to the person. So we thought we'd talk about some of our favorite stuff.
Right.
Yeah,
I love stuff. Now we're going to go through this as a quasi list, and I promise you, everyone who knows me, don't worry. Yes. That stuff is going to be the last thing we talk about, and you all and those of you who know me already know what I'm talking about as far as Magic stuff, accessories.
This stuff is always good to have on hand wherever you play. Let's have you start.
All right, so I'm going to start with the just sleeves. I know, dull, a little boring, sounds kind of basic. The thing with sleeves is, I get it. There's a certain amount of utility to the sleeve. You want to have something that's good. You want to, if you're someone who double sleeves or single sleeves, whatever. You've got almost anybody who uses sleeves has a personal preference for what you're doing. For me, for the longest time, sleeves have always been about looking for a good sleeve and getting a massive enough quantity so that I can easily swap between decks.
Yeah,
because it was driving me crazy because I had 15 different kinds of sleeves, and it was just, you would take the card out of one deck, re-sleeve it into the new sleeve for the new deck, and it's just like, why am I doing this? Because a lot of these cards are cards you move from one deck to the next, so as soon as you pull the deck apart, you end up putting it into another deck.
Yeah.
So I made an effort to try and get all the same sleeves, and then lately I'm now looking to change that because it's way more interesting and way more fun for me to have sleeves that have something on the back,
right,
and that could show off some personality, as opposed to what I've had for the last several years, which is basically just a straight black back on my sleeve, which is nice because I have been able to transfer it from decks to decks, but even there, a lot of times the sleeves are maybe not quite as perfect from one package to the next, and they're just that little bit off, and then you've got one card that's not quite right, and
it's marked.
It's
Get
marked.
Em.
So, and I appreciate that I do casual play, but I still don't like that. So I'm trying to get it set up.
It's interesting because obviously it happens in waves where like I'm sure once you diversify your sleeves, there will be a point where you may go back to having uniform sleeves eventually. But I'm at a point now where I'm like, I do want that because I've got a handful of quote unquote expensive cards that I am using as a base to start building certain decks, and then I'm realizing like later on like, oh, this doesn't belong in this deck, but I don't want to just like leave it out. Or I'm like, oh, this would work better in this deck, so I'm doing what you were saying, which is, unsleeving it and sleeving it in a different sleeve, and I'm like, oh, now I gotta find something to put in this sleeve, and it's it is dreamy to be able to just kind of have these fluid decks that don't necessarily have the same cards even week to week.
Right. Well, I mean, even just basic land.
It's getting to be hot out, so our ice maker's going.
Yeah, the ice machine's running hot in behind me here. So the basic lands, the idea was that if I could get all of the basic lands that I regularly use in decks in the same sleeves, well, then at least when I take them out of the deck and they're sitting there waiting for the next deck to get put into, they're already sleeved up. So it's just sitting there waiting for the next deck to come along to load that into.
Nothing makes sleeving feel like a waste of time like sleeving basics.
Yeah, there's nothing like going through your commander deck and sleeving all 100 cards, and then you get to the bottom 40 cards, and you're just sleeving one land after another, and it's like, yeah, these I pulled these out of my last deck,
right?
That I just took apart.
Yeah.
So, it gets a little frustrating. However, having said all that, Andy got me these awesome, cool sleeves that have my little image on the back of the sleeve, and I'll be a-okay with resleeving different decks with those.
Yeah,
and I'll be looking to get a few more of them actually. So
those are the Dragon Sleeve Customs, which my wife actually got me a set as well with my darling cat dressed up as a little king on the back of mine, and it's tough because having one set of them, it's you got to find the perfect deck.
Yeah,
for you is fairly easy. You put it in Grenzo.
Yeah,
I have since taken apart my Tesa deck. So I'm like, where do I put these? And part of me is like, oh, just whatever deck you're currently working on. I'm like, I'm not going to want to have to, keep moving them. And for some reason, I feel the strong urge to have it on the perfect deck.
Right.
But yeah, sleeves. They're out there. You got plenty of options.
Like I said, it's pretty straightforward stuff, and honestly, I'm also not going to sit here and tell you which sleeves to get. That's a personal preference thing, and honestly, I think the professor has made a career out of laying that out for you. So I mean, go check out the professor and make your sleeve selections.
Yeah, and honestly, if you don't know where to start, even after watching the prof's videos, like what I've done for the longest time is just whatever is either on sale or, a different color of a certain sleeve that I like, just to see how the colors look. And, I'm narrowing it down to a specific thing before I go all in on one sleeve. But
I will say, part of the reason why I wanted to get everything in the same sleeve, or at least another reason, is when you pull out your commander deck with your friends and they know what your commander is before you flipped it over, because they can tell from the sleeves which deck it is. That's not the best.
Nah.
I like having that surprise factor, so I still want to keep as many cards in the same kind of sleeve as I can.
Yeah. So. My next one, or my first one, the one that I wanted to bring to the table, was blank cards. So like we've got dry erase cards here on the list, but I think that goes for any either blank card or something a little bit more uniform than just a torn piece of paper for things like tokens. With that, bring the appropriate markers. There are plenty of times that because I've got just actual blank playing cards,
right?
Ones that you use Sharpies on. There are plenty of times that I only have a few Sharpies, and I can draw a cute little thing and have it be forever if I like it enough.
Yeah.
I know that the dry erase are very popular right now.
So many of my games, I don't have time to create a nice card.
Right.
So the dry erase is great because you just scribble a couple of words on it, slap it on the table, becomes very obvious whether it's tapped or untapped and what it is. As opposed to, like you say, the random piece of paper, the sleeve, magic card sleeve, with
the die,
nothing on it, the die
that you can't tell if it's tapped or not.
And you can't tell if it's tapped or not. So I like that idea. The other reason I like the dry erase is if you do have time, well, you can spend all the time in the world on that one. You can mess around, or take no time at all. So you can go back and forth.
The nice thing too with blank ones is that there are an astonishing amount of times that you're going to create a token that there isn't a card for.
Yeah.
Whether it's because you have a copy effect, which I mean, sure, then now they have the copy card, the copy tokens, but say everything else has left the battlefield other than that copy. And you have like 3 copies of 3 different things. It's hard to start keeping track of, especially if you're the opponent of this person who has these copies. And I think the dry erase is brilliant. I'm surprised it took until the past couple of years,
right?
And obviously it really helps too with webmander, as they're dubbing it, webcam magic, where you can't be in person. But what I like about them too is that they're versatile. You can add abilities easily. You can do really whatever you need to, and one of the things that I like doing with them is keeping commander damage.
Right.
Sometimes you can have just like a pile of dice trying to keep track of who has done what commander damage to whom and all these things. But if you just have it on a dry erase card, you're like, all right, I've done this damage to this person. This person's done this damage to me. And then just and then just kind of keep it.
Yeah, they can be a whole lot more than just
tokens,
clues, treasures, and
food,
a token, food, and a copy of whatever creature you're copying. You can do that. Keep track of the things you need to do during your upkeep. You scribble a reminder. Everybody has a good laugh because it's like, wow, you can't remember to draw an extra card on your upkeep. No, I cannot. And while, yes, a lot of times just putting a die on top of your library is enough to trigger that, if you're running a deck that has several different things that go on, if a creature enters the battlefield and you've got 3 or 4 different things happening every time a creature enters the battlefield, it's probably a good idea to have a little reminder there, that just so you're not missing one of them consistently.
Oh, definitely.
And it's just sort of a nice way to sort of keep the games moving. As somebody with ADHD and
who likes to play a lot of triggers, they can definitely help. They can help simulate the stack as well. If somebody's having a hard time visualizing, all right, I need to put this in before this resolves, but after this resolves, it's great.
Keeping track of large amounts of different colored mana is also a handy way. It's also a handy way to go. Admittedly, I still like to use different colored dice for that, but you can certainly use the dry erase cards or even just the regular cards, whichever you prefer. Some friends of mine were good enough to put together BrewCon tokens, and they're blank on one side and they've got a big BrewCon logo on the other side, and it's always a treat when I get a chance to pull out some of the tokens that were created during that time. So,
oh, definitely. And to kind of quickly close this one off, obviously feel free to use the ready-made tokens if you've got them. I know Moxfield. I don't know if there are any other websites that you can just throw your deck list up and it'll tell you what tokens you need. If you have a little bit extra room in your deck box, throw the tokens that you make the most in with the rest of your deck, so you don't have to go searching through your 30 or 40 tokens. That's what I like doing. I sleeve up a couple in some of my decks just to kind of retain some sort of uniformity. I have made the mistake of shuffling in like a treasure or two, but you know what? Oops.
Yeah. So, and that's something else that I like about them is that for the most part, they're not sleeved. So
yeah,
they almost never get shuffled back in. So it works out fairly well for my decks. My next thing on the list, I'm going to go with dice.
Okay.
And while I know that for most people, it's just, I've got a handful of dice. I use them to keep track of +1/+1 counters, or maybe even my life total. For me, dice goes beyond that. I have different colored dice that I use to keep track if a creature has a -1/-1 counter. I have obviously dice for the +1/+1 counters. I have special dice for Planeswalker loyalty abilities.
Ooh,
I have, but most importantly, I have Buzzbark. And when you're running Buzzbark with Krark's Thumb, which lets you choose the best of 2 rolls, and you're throwing a pile of dice from a certain height, it's not really fair to just simply choose if X is 6 on Buzzbark. Instead of throwing 6 dice with Krark's Thumb, you throw 12. But it's not really fair to throw 12 dice and just choose the 6 best options, because that's not really what's happening. It says you're supposed to choose the best of those 2.
Right.
Now, you're also not, with Krark, you're not going to throw 2 at a time until you get your 6, or with Buzzbark, because that's not fair. So what I did was I went out and got different colored dice for this, because this way I've got color pairs, and when I throw them, I choose of the blue dice, which one do I want, and I remove the one that I don't, and I go through like that with different colors for each of the pairs until I get down to just the best option for each color pair. So that's part of the reason why I picked dice. The other part with Buzzbark is it's amazing when you're throwing dice from a certain height. A lot of people, because Buzzbark does have the option to throw them at your opponent's cards to try and do damage. Now, something I rarely do, but you can do it, and everyone really appreciates the fact that I use foam dice, because there's no way to even leave a dent on a card if you're using foam dice. Whereas a regular die, even with rounded edges, can still leave even some small mark. And I don't want to annoy anybody, no matter how particular they are about their cards, if I'm throwing dice their way. So I use foam dice, and I use the biggest foam dice I'm allowed to use. And but yeah, my dice bag is jam packed, and I easily have 30 different dice in there, and
Dyson
probably, and I think each of them offer something up a little different. So
yeah, and I think with dice too, like it's becoming increasingly more important to have a variety.
Yeah.
I really enjoy having the 10-sided dice, if only to keep track of two-digit numbers. You can have one of each.
Yeah.
Or even just one 10-sided and then another whatever, so that you can easily use one for each digit.
Yeah.
And we've got Baldur's Gate Commander Legends coming up. I know that they threw in a few in the previous Adventures in the Forgotten Realm, a few cards that rolled dice that weren't D20 or D6.
Right.
Granted, they were in the Commander product, but we play Commander.
We are reaching the point where, realistically, if you're a Magic player, you do need to, grab your dice for D&D, because you're probably going to be happy to have them.
Yeah, and I mean, relatively speaking, dice are fairly cheap, and they're a fairly cheap way to customize more of your play experience, be a bit more personality driven with your dice.
Yeah.
As silly as that sounds, I think sometimes it does kind of add a bit.
Yeah, as bizarre as it is, I think dice is one of the ways when you can be thrifty and still get all kinds of weird coolness, or if you want you can go whole hog. There are some ridiculously expensive dice, and when you realize that they all do the same thing, it's very much a preference in how you want to bling out your your accessories.
I'm going to kind of leech off this one for my next one,
yeah.
and kind of make it a short one before we head off to break.
Sure.
Just counters. I mean, like we were saying, dice can easily show +1 counters, -1 counters. But now, especially since Ikoria, we've got ability counters.
Oh, yes.
Granted, we also, have had dozens of types of counters before this in weird, off-putting ways. But I know Infinitokens with the dry erase tokens, they also make little round ones that you can write. Oh, like this is a vigilance counter and throw it.
The smaller discs that you could throw it on a card.
So there are those, but also like go onto Etsy, just type in ability counters MTG or something, and plenty will show up. We've got somebody in our play group who's got dice that have like
I think
vigilance,
12-sided dice with a word on each side to sort of show what that particular creature has. I love those.
Yeah. Or if we're going, Magic official, we've got all the punch out cards from Ikoria. We've got some from Streets of New Capenna, where it's shield counters and then all the abilities, and or you can there are so many results out there that you can just find like little a bit more tough, rugged versions of the little cardboard that come in a booster pack.
I have little tiny metal, I guess for lack of a better term, coins, and on one side they say I've got one that says +1, and you flip it over and it says +2, and on a different coin it says -1, you flip it over, it says -2. They make great +1 and more importantly -1 counters, because those are harder to find, and a lot of time you're using dice for them. And while it is clear to me that black die that I'm using, it's -1, it's not necessarily as clear to everyone else that that's what it is, especially if you've got +1 counters floating on your other creatures.
Yeah. So, I think that's kind of where it is stronger to have very distinct, very separate like counters. Especially where, say you've got, I don't know, something that gives +1 counters, and then you also are playing tokens. You're going to usually mark it as like, oh, I've got 5 1/1s here, so you've got a 5 die on it.
Right.
And then say you've put like 3 +1 counters on it. What are you going to do? Put another die that says 3 and then confuse everyone, including yourself?
Right.
I've had that happen to myself plenty of times. And it sometimes really screws with your combat, honestly.
Yeah.
So make things separate, make things pop. It's also a great conversation starter. But with that, we're going to cut over to break real quick. We're going to give you a cool message from our sponsor, and we'll be back with a few more stuff. Be right back. This episode of Temple of False Pod is brought to you by Teferi's Puzzle Box. Do you think he keeps his deck in that puzzle box?
Maybe.
You could say so. He'll never tell. Now back to you.
This episode of Temple of False Pod is brought to you by Quark's thumb. Because only Quark could see his thumb and other thumb as accessories?
How do you think Quark feels about his other thumb? Do you think he calls it his other thumb, or do you think he just calls it his thumb?
Well, there's Quark's thumb and his other thumb.
Right.
Well, I guess it would depend.
How long between his two thumbs being cut off?
Were they cut off at the same time?
Because then they're both his thumb.
Because if one thumb was cut off first,
right,
is the remaining thumb? Does he call that the remaining thumb his other thumb? Or does he refer to his other thumb as the one that was cut off, first?
This is brilliant.
Who knows?
I think we have to go directly to the source.
Right.
Quark.
At some point we'll ask Quark, but unfortunately, without any thumbs, I don't know that he's going to be able to pick up the phone.
He's definitely not going to be able to text you back.
That could be a trick.
Now back to you. Bruce has just informed me that I'm going first, so I'm going to start talking about deck boxes. They come in many shapes and sizes. They may even come in just some elastic bands or a Ziploc bag I've seen. It really all depends on, your connection to the game, the connection to your cards, how willing you are to show off its wear and age. It's like a nice salt and pepper beard. Like, you're either going to color it and keep it looking pristine, or you're going to show off some experience with showing its true colors.
I have a couple of deck boxes that are individually made. Big reason why I like deck boxes. Leaf Kicker, he makes poly enamel.
Okay.
I'm not sure how to describe the material, but essentially he forms it into whatever images that he wants. He's got some awesome looking ones. The one that I have is essentially, it looks like a wooden box painted blue, and it has on the top of it, it has 2 dials, so you can keep track of your life total for Commander.
Ooh.
Unfortunately, there was an incident. It fell, and the dials are no more. But
what the
hell? Box itself is still in great shape. It's still a great box. I really like the box, so I continue to use it.
As with everything on this list, there are custom options. There are artisan options. You can search for all these things and find infinite possibilities. And then there's plenty of price points too. For a while, when I started, I used to get the sidewinders, and I love those. Yeah. But they're also, they can be like $15, which isn't bad. But when I started to build more and more decks, and the frequency started really ramping up, I'm like, I can't justify this for myself right now. And I found that those clear, like $3 ones that you can buy in like a 4-pack off Amazon or from your local game store or from plenty of places, they're 2 shells that kind of one goes over the other, and it's clear and it's amazing.
The nice part about the clear is that you can point them all in the right direction, so you can see your Commander. So when you've got it sitting on a shelf or even in your bag, you can easily flip it around and see what's in it. Mine are the Ultimate Guard. And they're the fold over. They're a solid color, and they've got a magnet locking mechanism to keep it closed. They work really well. They're great. I really like them. I bought a bunch of them, and I bought them in all different colors so that I could more easily keep track of what deck is in them. Yeah, but I still don't remember which deck is in which. So I still end up having to pop them open to see the Commander, which isn't ideal, but honestly, I like the deck, and I like the deck boxes enough that
they're like
get away from it.
They're like a nice piece to have on like a bookshelf too. They're not super gaudy. They're just kind of these ones specifically are kind of matte and not leathery, but they've got that kind of textured look to them that they just kind of look nice if they were on a bookshelf. I know that I bought a pack of cheap just name tags to throw on the side of my deck boxes for the ones that you can't see,
which I think is a great idea,
because then you can kind of do a bit of art to see if to kind of make it look nicer, but also like you can tell what it is from across the room. The only thing that I've ever come across with deck boxes is whatever you choose, make sure that it fits. I've double sleeved a deck before and really had to like shove it in to a deck box, and I'm like, ugh.
Be sure to check. If you're someone who does a single sleeve versus a double sleeve, the double sleeve decks are just far bigger.
Oh yes,
far bigger. So please buy accordingly.
I've seen plenty of people with boulders, which are just like they're essentially the size of your deck. They're very minimal in terms of packaging. Like they're a good size. They fit your deck. They fit a few tokens. And the nice thing about those is they come in a huge variety of colors.
Yeah.
So I've seen people like mix and match. So if it's like a Rakdos deck, you can have a red top and a black bottom, or vice versa. And you can really mix and match, which is just also another nice flair kind of thing.
Yeah.
That you can't really do with too many deck boxes. But when you can, it adds to the style, but it also like is easily identifiable. I recently, and this is going to be more directed at the makers of these, but the Boulder line had a RTE line, which was like Return to Earth or something. It was they're more environmentally friendly. They're made of recycled material. They're more recyclable. All these things, but they come in 3 colors or like 4 colors, and I'm like, I want more colors.
Right.
So if you're listening out there, make more colors. I want them. Me specifically. That I'm sure plenty of people love these. They've got like a nice texture to them. I'm sure. They're great.
Yeah. All right. So my next one, as far as accessories, I'm going to cheat. I'm going to choose Plane Chase cards, which I know technically are Magic cards, but they're accessories, and they make your games better.
Oh yeah. Especially compared to any of the other tertiary like add-ons that you can have. You've got the big people cards. Why can't I think of it? You start with it and you're like, oh, I'm this person.
I know which ones you're talking about, and
they're in the same box that we have.
Yeah, I'm blanking on it as
Vanguard.
Well. Yes.
The Vanguard cards. You've got the Vanguard cards. You've got that weird Ixalan one where it's like you set out the tiles, and it's essentially just another way to add to the game. Plane Chase is, God, it's great.
It's the easiest one. Andy and I have done an entire podcast on this. You can go back and listen to the podcast. I'm not going to go into all the different ways to use Plane Chase cards. I'm not going to go into all the rest of it. I just am going to say that...
God, I think that was our 2nd episode.
Plane Chase cards are just... yes, and Plane Chase cards are great. I really feel like they add so much to your... They can add so much to your game. I wouldn't recommend them for every single game you run, but it's certainly a nice change of scenery when it comes to your Magic games. And I love me a good set of Plane Chase cards. And you don't even have to be the completist. You don't need every single one. You just need enough of them so that you're seeing different ones from game to game.
Yeah,
that's all it is.
It just adds a little variety. You can take out the ones that everyone just dreads if you really want. But even sometimes those can be the spice that your game needs.
Well, it's nice because even with those ones, you're all suffering through it. And there's a group. There's very much that group of, can we ever get off of this one? And even that, I think, brings a little something. And I like that.
My next one is going to be 2.
Okay.
It's life counters and the Commander Hot Tub. So I'm
going
to start with life counters. There are so many different ways to keep track of your life total, from just writing it down and then just like marking it off as you go. Keep rewriting it, whatever. Just a little slip of paper, whatever. To dice, to actual physical contraptions. I love using just 2 10-sided dice because it's real easy to be like 4, 0, great. But my biggest issue with dice is that, there's a few. There's a bunch of cons to having dice as your life total. The biggest is that you can knock them.
Yeah.
And then you're like, what was I at?
A thump on the table, an overactive tapping.
A loose sleeve,
reaching across the table to read somebody's card. Somebody just bump the table when they stand up, or
manic cat.
All kinds of ways.
But I usually use it in conjunction with the Commander Hot Tub so that my life total is in a central place. So for those who don't know what I'm talking about, Commander Hot Tub is product. I'm sure it's got a better name, but you keep it in the middle. Everybody puts their commander on their corner of it.
Yeah.
So it's like a commander zone.
Right. Now, the one that I have is something, I believe it's from Card Kingdom. I know that Cool Stuff also produces one. Essentially, yeah, it's like a small playmat, and it gives you a place to put the commanders when they're not on the battlefield. So it's essentially a command zone. But
it helps you keep track of commander damage.
Yes.
And who took it.
Right.
It helps you keep track of commander attacks. It's a great central location that anybody can look at any time without having to be like look all the way over the table. It's right there. All the information you need.
Right. Rather than having your commander sitting, just off your playmat or maybe on the edge of your playmat where no one is really 100% sure if it's actually in play or not. This really does clarify it. And I'm not sure exactly. I believe they're called command zone pads or whatever. Yeah. But my friend Andrew McGreeny, he was the one I heard referring to it as the commander hot tub. I don't know where he got it, if he created it himself. If he did, good on you, Andrew. And if not, let me know. Let me know where you heard that from, because I've been referring to it as the commander hot tub.
It's a great little visual too. Just kind of chilling in the hot tub. And I mean, for why I kind of included it with life counters is like it is a place that you can keep your dice for life counters.
Right.
People can see it. You're less likely to knock it over or bump it or mistake it for tokens or just loose dice, which I've done before. And then I'm like, oh, where's my life total? Oh, crap. It's great.
I have a life counter, and I love it. I've had it for a very long time. It's one of these scry counters. Some of you old school players might have seen this. It's essentially a disc with 1 to 20 on one side. You flip the disc over. It's 21 to 40 on the other side. And you set a piece in the middle of it, and it points at one of the numbers. So it's an easy way to keep track of your life total. However, if you bump it, it will spin wildly, and of course you will lose track of it. The other downside of that one is the numbers aren't very distinguishable.
Right.
So anyone who's not sitting immediately next to you has no idea what your life total is. Now, you can say that's either good or bad. That's up to you. I will say that I think the best life counter that I have seen, it comes with the Commander products. Or it came with a number of the Commander products.
Yeah, they've updated it since, but yeah, the like older Commander products, the dial.
Yeah, they had the dial so that it tracks a life total anywhere from 0 to 99.
And it clicks into place.
So even if you bump it and it falls over, it's not changing the total. You just set it back up. The numbers are clear. They're large enough to be visible from right across the table, so everybody knows what your life total is. They don't need to ask. And while asking, okay, so what's everybody's life? Is innocuous enough. Virtually everybody knows that if you're asking, they want to know who has the lowest life total or who has the highest.
Right.
So this just avoids that whole conversation. They can just see it and make decisions based on what's visual as opposed to otherwise. I really like that one. I don't have one, and at some point I may get one.
I'm sure. So I'm sure you can find them fairly available.
Yeah.
If you have a friend with a 3D printer, I'm sure you can get one printed fairly easily.
Yeah, there was there was a group that was essentially printing a similar one, but it was like it was almost like a triangle. So at the base was the 2 points and the top was the third point. And it would allow you to spin, to set them much in exactly the same way as the Commander ones. But more importantly, they were kind of a blank, so you could paint them yourself. It was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So.
And furthermore, they've updated them to be like 90% cardboard with it's like a pinwheel type thing.
Okay.
That come in every Commander deck, where there's a little window and it will display 1 to 20. Flip it over, it displays 21 to 40.
Right.
I find that a little weird, considering like there are going to be plenty of times where you're going to be over 40. But you know what? It does its job of counting 1 to 40 fairly easily. It kind of stays in place. Mm-hmm. As long as there's not like a strong gust of wind.
The credit card looking thing that you're talking about.
Yeah. Mine usually find their way to the recycling bin, but they're fine.
Yeah, they're fine.
But yeah, a few things to keep in mind when finding the perfect life counter. Make sure that it's readable from across the table, and make it easy to manipulate.
Yeah. Next one, playmats. If you're not using a playmat, then I assume you're not sleeving your cards. Because to me, it's a playmat should be just as frequently used as a sleeve. I would not want to. There are so many surfaces where you're playing Magic where it doesn't make sense. The surface is just simply not clean, and you're going to scratch. You're going to muck up your cards. You should be using a playmat virtually all the time. The other part of that is using a playmat makes it very clear what cards are in play, what cards are where. There's no. If you don't have a commander hot tub and your commander is sitting just off your playmat, then it's obviously not in play.
Right.
Your playmat sorts out very clearly where this is where my lands are, this is where my creatures are. You can organize it so much easier, and it's easy for other folks to see at a glance what's happening.
Oh, absolutely.
On top of that, there are so many different pieces of art you can get for your playmat. It's unreal. It's so easy to personalize. They're not particularly expensive. It's just, and I think it's just a good idea overall. So.
Yeah. The last one we have on the list before Bruce's special one, I guess, is carrying cases. You can throw it in a grocery bag. This is your stuff. This is your decks. You can throw it in a backpack. I found this really cool. It's a camera bag, honestly. Where
that's why I put this on the list.
Yeah, I love that bag so much. It feels weird to play Magic out of any other bag, but basically it has a big felt lined inside, where then it also has like Velcro separators that you can adjust,
right?
And so like you can keep your stuff in place, or you can adjust it around. I've made it so that I can keep my playmat in the middle, and then my tokens on one side, and my decks on the other, or my dice. And the best thing about this is that it opens from the part that goes against your back.
Okay.
So like the zipper goes along the front, I guess, or the back. The part with the straps, it goes along that side.
So it makes it really hard for somebody at a convention to open up your bag if it's on your back.
Right. It's great. And it zips all the way, so you can just lay it on the table and flat open it wide open. Yeah. So you can grab whatever you need without having to like pull something out and have everything kind of fall into its place. And it's great. It's accessible. It's comfortable.
The only other carrying case that really jumps to mind immediately is the quiver. I like the quiver, and for those of you who haven't seen it, essentially it's a long, thin box with attachments on either end for a strap that can be then strapped over your shoulder.
Like a quiver.
It holds, yes, and it holds roughly, I think, 4. I think there are 2 different sizes. So let's say 4 EDH decks and probably a couple extra extraneous stuff, and it will hold more if you're willing to leave all of your decks unboxed. And the quiver is designed to hold them that way as well. So you can. It's still secure that way.
What I've seen too is that you don't fill it all the way up with your decks, and then you have space for phone charger or a granola bar.
To me, the key with a carrying case is one, it doesn't have to be a specific magic case. The key to me with the carrying case is it heavy on its own? There are so many options that you can use where I feel like you're starting with 5 pounds of weight as your case, whether it's your backpack or your whatever else. I've had
toolbox.
I've had at least 4 different carrying cases, and each one I'll go through a day at Gen Con and realize, okay, this thing is hot garbage because your shoulder is being torn off because you're trying to carry 6 decks, and 6 decks are enough to make you whimper in agony by the end of the day, and it's just that's not effective. So make sure you find a case, whatever case you want to use, is something that is either that's compact or it doesn't weigh a lot. And the other part is you really do want to make something that isn't just easily accessible to everybody around you while you're wearing it.
Right.
Theft is a real issue, and just because we haven't been at conventions at larger gatherings now for for over 2 years, don't think that the thieves are not going to come back when we do. They are. So always keep that in mind. Make sure that whatever your case is in your sight line all the time, or is somehow secured to you. So
yeah, I think for me the thing is like be realistic. So like don't bring all of your decks if you don't have to. Like bring the decks that you know you're going to play, and then choose a bag accordingly. I mean, I upgraded to this camera bag because I had been using just like a messenger type, just over one shoulder strap bag.
Yeah.
Which has its own benefits.
Yeah.
Over this bag actually. And one of them is surprisingly not weight. This bag is extremely light. But my messenger bag, it carried, 2 or 3 decks, my tokens, my dice, a playmat, and had room for some other stuff. And it was great. My favorite thing about it is that you could sling it to your front.
Yeah.
And so, like, you don't have to have it behind you like you would a backpack, but you can kind of make yourself a little bit more compact, especially squeezing into tightly packed spaces, or just
riding on the train where you're that jerk with the massive backpack swinging around, smashing into everybody around you. Yeah.
So be aware of these things as well. The Prof also has plenty of videos about any of the things we've talked about today.
All right, so the last one is something the Prof does not have a video about.
Quick, let's get this episode out before he does.
I marked it on our list as LCC.
I still don't know what it means.
It's called Library Card Catalog. It's the best accessory in all of Magic. It's bar none. It is spectacular. If you have the opportunity to get a library card catalog, get it. I don't care if you don't have room in your house for it. Just get it. Hold on to it for a couple of years and then sell it off. You'll make money. These things are constantly going up in price. They're getting harder and harder to find because, to be honest, they don't have them in schools or universities anymore, and they haven't now for quite some time. And every year gets farther and farther away from that time when they did have them all over the place.
I hate to make you feel old.
Yeah.
Some of our listeners might not know what you're talking about.
All right. So a library card catalog. There used to be a day when, prior to computers, where if you wanted to find a book at the library, you had to go up to this shelf, this
cabinet of drawers.
Yes, a cabinet of drawers. And they're tiny drawers. They held
index cards.
They held index cards that had a listing of information about a book, and each book basically had one card. So you had to figure out, do your search. You would find the card with the book. You write down the number, then you go look for the book in the library, and you find it there, and then you take it out. Now, obviously, these things have gone the way of the dodo for that sort of thing because, well, computers do allow you to do cross searches and everything else so much better. And
faster.
It's much faster, much easier. A librarian doesn't have to maintain it, and if somebody pulls out one of the cards and puts it back in the wrong place, it's not lost forever. So the libraries don't use them anymore. School libraries used to have them all the time. University libraries have them all the time. They're gone. They don't exist.
No.
So
they're beautiful pieces of furniture.
Right. And they set them in storage for years because nobody had any idea what the hell to do with them. And now they're realizing you can store virtually anything in there. If you have a smaller one with like 4 drawers or 6 drawers, you'll see those ones sitting in in a handyman's on a work desk holding screws, bolts, whatever else.
Knickknacks.
Anything that's a little smaller that could fit into a box like that works out really well, especially if you have a large variety of them. Mine, what we've discovered is you can also hold wine bottles in them.
Oh,
and
shit.
They disappear. So suddenly you're not displaying a massive number of bottles of wine, which your friends have decided they're going to get through all of them that night. So instead, you're only showing 2 bottles, and you finish that, and everything's fine. But more importantly, for what we're talking about here, Magic cards fit in them wonderfully.
Oh, it's perfect.
It is perfect. I have organized it so that I've got them by color, by creatures, by creature size, by spells. There's a little space in the front of each of the drawers where you can put a little paper tag which you can then label as whatever's in the drawer. The drawers come right out of the box, so you can pull a drawer out, put it on top of the shelf, and do whatever, and then do a quick search. It is just so convenient, and they're beautiful.
Yeah.
There's maple, there's pine, there's oak, you name the wood, there's probably been a card catalog for it. The handles on the drawers are usually the small metal handles.
Brass, yeah.
And they're mostly brass. It's a beautiful piece. It looks awesome, and
it's inconspicuous for the most part.
It is very inconspicuous. So it tucks your Magic cards away so you don't have piles and piles and piles of them all over your house, which other people who live in your house will probably appreciate. And it also means that if you're keeping up on the organization, it means you know where your cards are. And that's huge. I love my card catalog, and I never miss an opportunity to talk about it.
Yeah. I'm surprised that they haven't started making... I'm surprised either Wizards or, anybody hasn't started making them even as cheap furniture, like IKEA or something. I'm sure that there would be somewhat of a demand.
Right. Well, I know that the wood makers who do a lot of deck boxes have looked at doing something like this. Mm-hmm. The difficulty is that it takes a lot of their skill out of it, because essentially you're looking for most of the drawers, you're looking for a very thin, light wood that's strong enough to stay together. So it takes away a lot of the skill, but a lot of the cost is still there.
Yeah.
Shipping one of these things is a nightmare.
I bet. The closest I've seen for a quote-unquote official product would be BCW has the essentially you slide in your long boxes into
the cardboard long boxes into the hotel.
Yeah. Which so many of these cardboard boxes have been just they're so wanted that they're so hard to get.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, card catalogs, man.
Yeah.
I saw one on Craigslist. It was probably a little out of my price range, and if I wasn't moving within the next couple years at the time, I would have gotten it. But I'm like, how do I move this across the country? So I'm waiting till I get across the country to find one, because oh god, just having that organization would be key. But that's gonna do it for us tonight.
Yeah. Hey, everybody's here.
Yeah, we gotta go play some Magic.
Yeah.
So we'll see you next week on Temple of the False Pod, where our decks are not optimized, but our plays sure as heck are fun. I'm Andy.
I'm Bruce.
Thank you so much for listening. So have a great night, and may your 5th land be the Temple.
Bye!
Wait. Before you go, I just wanted to say thank you for listening. You can reach out to us via email at falsepodmtg@gmail.com or on Twitter @falsepodmtg. Bruce is at ManaBurned, and I'm at Andy Weekend, though you'll definitely notice I use the podcast Twitter far more often. Now that we've got you here, make sure you subscribe, like, rate us on whatever podcast platform you use. It helps us out. It gets us more reach. Subscribe to us on our YouTube channel. Like a video there. Leave some comments for more casual enjoyment. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back with some more timeless discussions about all things casual. So come hang out, and may your fifth land be the temple. Bye-bye. Should I do my best, Bruce? Bye!